for a second, slightly inanely. Hi and welcome, and a special welcome to Mark Witch, who, Mark, I was going to say I was going to give introduction, but Mark, just do you want to tell us a little about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for inviting me tonight. So my name is Mark Rich, and I was born in Kingswood in Bristol. I still live in Bristol now. So I'm now 44. I'll be 45 in August. So I've lived here basically all my life. I've tried to get away, but haven't been successful. I've been to Bible college in Horsham, etc. But yeah, so just a little bit about my story. Andy's asked me to share tonight. So just briefly, my mum was a Christian, so I went to church from a very early age, from the age of 3. My dad was supportive, but didn't sort of come along with us. And I became a Christian when I was 9 years of age. I knew that going to church didn't make you a Christian. I knew that you had to make a personal decision yourself, even at a very young age. I knew that, and nothing dramatic. I just simply asked my mum one morning and knelt in the bathroom and gave my life to Jesus, and then my journey with the Lord began at 9. I struggled through my teens with various things, as many teenagers do. However, I was baptized in believer's baptism, adult baptism, when I was 14. But I did struggle through my teens with various, temptations, alcohol, women, other things, that teenagers struggle with. Although teenagers nowadays have got additional challenges that I didn't have, social media and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I had a church background, and then I obviously, some of the worldly stuff crept in when I was in my teens and stuff. But the Lord was always there with me, and so I qualified as an accountant when I was 33. That's been my temp for a long time. But I've been involved with church ministry, if you like, on and off since I was in my sort of late teens, early 20s, really. Had a bit of a wobble in my 20s as well. But yeah, when I was 33, I met Andy. Andy was then the vicar in Kingswood, Holy Trinity Kingswood, and and I got involved in street pastors in Kingswood, and I did that with Andy for 6.5 years, I think. I was also involved with Christians Against Poverty and a church plant that Andy was involved in Kingswood, called All Souls as well. So I was involved with church ministry for, and I have been for 12 years now. Just very briefly, that was in the sort of east side of Bristol, in Kingswood Down End Way. If you know Bristol at all, we're now based on the south side of Bristol in a place called Hartcliffe, which is it's a council estate, basically, with council flats, etc. And it was built back in the 50s to basically put those who are on kind of benefits are out there on the outskirts of the city. So the church that we're involved in now is called the River of Life. It used to be called Hartcliffe Christian Fellowship. And if I showed you a map, it's literally in the middle, and it's got about 4 or 5 tower blocks around it. So it's a very needy area. Me and my wife Anna have been there for 5.5 years now, and we took on the senior leadership in October of last year, so during lockdown. So that's kind of a bit of a whirlwind of my life summed up in 4.5 minutes of 44 years.
That's fairly impressive. I was saying that Mark's also got one of those chairs that looks like he should have a white cat and be like the new Blofeld in the Bond movie when it finally comes out. We've also been joined by Dave. Dave's just suddenly appeared. Dave was also one of our street pastor teams and led one of the teams in Kingswood Street Pastors. In fact, both of you are Kingswood born and bred, aren't you? You're both Kingswood lads. In fact, interestingly, at my interview when I was applying to be a vicar in Kingswood, one of the questions I was asked, or discussion we had at the interview, was my dream was to see what would it look like for people who were in Kingswood to be properly Kingswoodian but also properly plugged into Jesus. And probably actually you two guys are probably the best example of that, really. You know, people who are definitely true Kingswood, but also truly plugged in Jesus. Although I would say that both of you are City fans, aren't you? So even though it's a slightly more Rovers area.
Yeah,
yeah, definitely. There's only one team in Bristol.
Two, Bristol City and Bristol City Reserves. Isn't that right?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say I did quite a lot of funerals where they played "Goodnight Eileen" as the coffin went out, because that was that's the Rovers song. But yeah, and Dave, you're also Dave was one of our street pastor teams, but he was also you also were part of a local church which moved to plant another church in Frenchay, which is slightly further around the Ring Road in Bristol, aren't you? So you're part of New Life, is that right?
New Life Church, yeah, I'm part of the leadership there. Yeah, we've been going since end of 2012.
Oh, fantastic!
So nearly 10 years now.
And so how long have you known Mark? The idea was we're going to be grilling Mark with lots of questions, but as it's just a three of us, we'll just have to
maybe on him. Yeah, maybe about 15 years probably now, I guess.
12
years, is it? Yeah.
February 2009, I came to what was called Bristol Community Church then in Kingswood in early February 2009, and then I met Dave and his wife, and then 12 years.
One of the first questions I was going to ask was a little bit about street pastors, really, and the which is one of the projects Mark and I was involved with and Dave was involved with. Do you want to say a little bit about what we did and why and how you found it? Would that be that whole vision behind there, and how that maybe helped shape you in being someone who was relaxed and confident in talking about Jesus? So that's a really badly phrased question. If I wasn't doing it live, I'd do that one again, but. In fact, I might be. See if I can edit it. So Mark, tell us a bit about street pastors and how maybe that helps you get more used to chatting about Jesus on the streets. Or was that before street pastors? Actually, was that something you felt confident with before? Because you've always been quite.
Well, initially the church, Bristol Community Church, that me and Dave were part of back then, they wanted a youth worker, and I actually approached the senior pastor at the time, one of the lead pastors, and said, I'd like to be involved with that because I've done youth work. And he said, actually, why don't you speak to the new local vicar called Andy Mason? He's up the road at Holy Trinity. He's looking to do some witnessing amongst the nighttime economy with an initiative called Street Pastors. And I thought, actually, I thought it was youth work, but actually, that really kind of hit a good note with me. So, and then obviously I came up and you Andy shared how you brought that, I planted one in Salisbury, a Salisbury initiative of street pastors, and the vision behind it, and it was just that kind of taking the church in action on the streets. I think that was one of the strap lines, and it is still one of the strap lines. It's actually church beyond the walls, and taking it out, and they're not expecting people to come in and talking to people on their level, but without any sort of Christian jargon. Because, if you're talking to people who have just come out of a nightclub or pubs, number one, they've had something to drink and they will tell you what they really think. So at least you know exactly where you stand and what you're dealing with.
That's true. Not normally left in much doubt.
Whatsoever. And I do appreciate that kind of direct honesty. I know some people are not comfortable with that, but also being born and bred and knowing the area and knowing the mindset of the people in the area, I think that was a huge advantage as well. But yeah, I've always loved witnessing, telling my story, or Jesus' story of what he's done in my life, rather, but also being able to do that in a kind of quite a challenging environment, I suppose. And because Street Pastors is very much that, but also as well, I like the fact that Street Pastors it wasn't necessarily preaching on the streets, but it was engaging with people to showing them the love of Jesus in practical ways, but also being willing to, if they did ask a question, to openly share my faith and what Jesus meant to me. So Street Pastors was such a blessing to me, and it also stretched me And I think that's good, not to a breaking point or broke me, but it actually did wonders for my growth in my faith and my dependency on God.
Yeah. I think we often do things like we say, well, I'll get involved with youth work because I've done that before. I feel comfortable with that. And I think sometimes God is saying, well, God isn't necessarily against us doing youth work or things we're comfortable with. But I kind of think that sort of God actually is, almost wants us to maybe not do things we've done before, or to be in that place where our faith is isn't comfortable. But we say, well, I could do that. Yeah, I could do that. And actually, sometimes I think God says, no, I don't want you to do something you can do. I want you to only do stuff that we can only do that you need me to be able to do it. Does that make sense? Yeah, that almost. I think we like comfort and God likes stretch. I think.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And the senior pastor at the time was absolutely wise to do that, and I'm so glad he did. He told me basically the title of that Christian book. I can't remember. I think it's, if you want to walk on water, you need to step out of the boat.
Oh yeah, John Ortberg. Yeah.
Yeah, and that title has stuck with me, and I think that whole scenario there. I went to my senior pastor and said, "You for it? No, I think you should step out of the boat. I think you should, push yourself." And yeah, I think you're right. Definitely, it was wisdom, and I did it, and I'm so glad I did, because otherwise I'd have been stuck in my comfort zone.
Yeah. How about you, Dave? How was your journey into street pastors? Because I guess you used to get maybe I'm casting aspersions, but my guess is that back in the day, a teenage Mark probably went to Chasers and a few of the other clubs and pubs in Kingswood. Is that once or twice?
Yeah, I did once or twice. Up until the point I was old enough to go to the pub, which sounds awful, doesn't it? But that is the cold reality of it. Yeah. So for me, I was part of the sort of extended leadership of the church in Kingswood that we were part of, and I always thought it was important, and I still do think it's important, that as a church leader you have an awareness of what's going on around you. You can't really feed into a community and have an influence in a community if you don't really know that community. And whilst I've grown up in it, I've been married for 15 years by that point, and haven't really been a regular clubber, let's say, certainly not in Kingswood. And so I sort of said, I'll come along one night. So the plan was to come out one night, and that was actually just before we actually properly launched Street Pastors itself, when we were just sort of a group of Christians out on the streets, and came along one night, and that was it really. Ended up coming every other Friday night, and then being part of the team to sort of actually formally launch Street Pastors into Kingswood. But I still think that's right. I still think it's really important that as leaders we understand what's going on around us. So recently is a good example of that. I say recently, forget about 2020. Back in August 2019, I went and did a ride along with the police in central Bristol.
By ride along, you don't mean you were nicked?
No, I wasn't nicked. No. I have some really good friends who are police officers, and I was able to accompany them on a August bank holiday weekend, sort of 5 p.m. till 3 a.m, out of the central Bristol response team. And I have to say, it's an eye-opener. What those guys are asked to do is pretty phenomenal, and it gives you an eyesight into the local communities that are there, what goes on behind the closed doors quite often. The real risk that actually people like our emergency services put themselves in. We all think we're good drivers, but until you've done twice the speed limit through residential areas after somebody, it's an eye-opener really. And but I think it's really important that we meet people where they're at as well. And going out on street pastors is exactly that. You're meeting people where they are. And I think one of the big things about evangelism is that you go to where they are. Yeah. The days of holding a seeker service and expecting people to rock up on a Sunday morning at 10:30. To be honest, I'm not even sure the church wants to rock up at 10:30 on a Sunday morning, let alone the non-church.
And matter of duty or sympathy.
Yeah. So Nikki, my wife, and I, we've set up. If we have a church office for us, it's a bit of a standing joke in our little church that our church office is the village pub. We make a point of going there once a fortnight. We have home group there sometimes. We take part in the quiz night. After church on a Sunday, we'll pop in for a Swifty after church. But actually, we've got to meet the community. We got to meet the landlady, become quite good friends. The church now is followed by the village pub on Facebook. If we post something, they repost it. So we're meeting a completely different group of people just by having a pint with someone, and meeting them where they are. So I think that's really key, really.
I think to use a language that's become very common at the moment, at this time, or has been very common, is it's all about bubbles. And I think for a long time, the church has been in a bubble that was definitely not infecting or affecting anybody else. We were in our own little bubble. And for me, the thing that really got me to start not Kingswood Street Pastors, Salisbury Street Pastors, was when I was in Salisbury, and I just got a nudge when I was sprawled out in front of the telly, and got a nudge to go and wander around the city centre. And I didn't want to do it really, because it was late and I was tired and I was grumpy, and that thing where God keeps on nudging you, turn the volume up on the telly and you try and pretend you haven't heard and all that sort of stuff, because I'm a good Christian like that. And eventually God wore me down, and I wandered with a slightly grumpy face down into town. And you just realise I'd done that evening. I'd been at an Alpha launch, which was incredibly middle class and incredibly sort of churchy. And then when I wandered around the streets, just having a little look, and there are people falling out of the kebab place, and they're being sick in the road and arguing in doorways and all that stuff, I just kind of thought, this is bonkers, but this is actually where Jesus would be. And actually, would Jesus been at the Alpha launch? Well, I expect he would, because he did go to the temple and stuff. But actually, the other thing that struck me was every church in the city centre was in darkness, and the doors were shut on the cathedral as well. They went, so keeping people out. And I was thinking, actually, this is the opposite of what we need to be, really. That idea about engaging with people where they're. So either of you got any stories of any favourite stories of your time with street pastors, or your time with doing that sort of street based work, or sort of chatting with people who aren't Christians, and how you found that?
Yeah, there's several occasions where just kind of helping. I remember meeting a guy who said that he wanted to follow a career in finance, and I was able to plug him into a good recruitment agency, and he got his career through that.
Yeah.
Also a practical way of connecting with people and meeting them, like you said, with their needs and their wants, and that dream was fulfilled in that sense. But yeah, I remember standing outside Bristol Community Church with a guy, I think his name was Lucas, or it might have been Luke, and he was genuinely asking questions. We weren't pushing him, and I was able to share my testimony and give it, share the gospel in if you like, average Joe Bloggs terms, with no jargon of justification, sanctification, all those long churchy words that we use. But it's
Kingswood, yeah, quality Kingswoodian, yeah.
Yeah, in Kingswood language, if you like, Kingswoodian, as you say. I do remember that. That was a wonderful time, one of many, getting to pray for people. Can you pray for my uncle, who's got cancer and stuff? People asking us. But I think one of the key things about street pastors was, and I've heard this said, I only said it last night at our church meeting, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. That's true. And the consistency of street pastors, that we were out week on week and week, it actually, in their minds, create these people do really care. So that then produces a platform and an opening for them to then tell you their story and to be able to ask questions. And then you get an opportunity, not to Bible bash, but to present Jesus to them in a way which they understand. Yeah.
You got anything, Dave, you want to? Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's various things, but as Mark said, as week, there's lots and lots of things, little things, and they all kind of, so you start thinking about them, they all sort of start flowing to the forward. And I think one thing the street pastors does, it shocks people, it bucks trends. People have a perception of church and what it is. And I think one good thing about street pastors, it really breaks down some stereotypes. So, when you've got people coming out of a nightclub and wanting to fight each other, and then you've got a 78-year-old, 5-foot little old lady stood in the middle saying, "Just calm it down, boys." And they look at, remember looking at Shirley, bless her, and saying, "Oh, hang on a minute, it's a bit bizarre. I haven't had that much to drink. What's going on?" But at the end of the day, if it's 6'4", if I stood in the middle, I could use my size to stop it. But she just pile in the middle, and you'd have lads coming out upset, and then they'd be crying their eyes out on her shoulder, and opening up.
I used to call her our secret weapon.
It's unbelievable, and the things that I remember are, as Mark said, it's when you care, when they see that you care. And I remember a guy who, a couple of guys. One was in the army, come back on R&R for 2 weeks. He's sort of like, you won't understand. And I said, well, tell me then, and we stood there chatting for a bit. And then he sort of started to gradually open up. The more I took interest, the more he opened up. I remember another guy, we were saying to him that, Jesus loves you, which is an easy sort of thing to throw out sometimes. And he said, no, you can't. You don't know what I've done. And I said, well, I don't care what you've done. But he does, and he still loves you. And then this guy sort of did open up a bit, and we had a good 2-hour conversation with him. And I know now he is in prison because of some of the things he did and has done since. And but hopefully those conversations, made a difference to him, and maybe they put a platform and sowed a seed that is now sprouting in his life. And it's those sorts of things that I think were amazing. I think also how actually it's not one church. I think that for me, if you said to me one thing that would change my thinking is around actually it's churches working together. And I'd say that, there were multiple churches in Kingswood, all different denominations who historically never worked together. If anything, worked against each other.
Sadly.
But we ended up, the three of us is running weeks and things and team leading. I remember saying, well, actually, I've got a key to, and the alarm codes to like 4 or 5 different churches on the high street, only one of which was my own. There's not many people who get, just get access to the parish church or get access to the Salvation Army or, the other churches. And so those sort of things which I think blew my mind. The more bizarre ones, I think, were freezing cold winter nights, going with Michael into the Salvation Army, and it's like that game where you have to put a bobble hat on and a scarf and eat a bar of chocolate. We like wrapped ourselves up in as much warm clothes as we could find.
So cold.
That was brilliant. And there's not many people who said that you can say they've been clubbing with the Archbishop of Canterbury, of course.
Well, that's true. Yeah, both of you did. I got the Bishop of Bristol, who's nice guy, but not the ABC.
No, but although you did get the girl getting him to sing "Happy Birthday" and flashing, of course.
I've actually had to write a thing in the. I don't know, this might not be appropriate to say actually, but never mind. We're recording. I've written a book that's coming out hopefully fairly soon, and I put a little bit about Justin Welby coming out, and Joe, who's editing these, said, "Did he say anything? Did anything interesting happen?" And I was like, well, yeah, but do I put flashing? But the Archbishop of Canterbury came to Kingswood and got flashed, as yeah. I mean, it wasn't like a sort of revival story.
I think the funniest bit about that was that he wore his black shirt and dog collar, and Bishop Mike wore purple, and so it looked like Bishop Mike was the more senior, so he got all the attention, whilst Justin Welby just stood back and laughed at him for large parts of it. Because no one had a clue who he was. It was quite amusing.
But I think that's probably quite great actually, because I bet he gets a lot of people faffing around him, giving him all this sort of bigging him up, and actually, probably realising that actually in the grand scheme of things, people don't know. The whole churchy bubble is irrelevant to most people. That's the Archbishop of Canterbury. Which one? Yeah. What? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember talking to the Archbishop. He came, didn't he? He's supposed to refer to him as Archbishop or Your Grace, and he didn't want any of that. He just said, no, just Justin.
Yeah,
Justin. Yeah.
And I kind of think there's a real humility about that, because I don't know. Just call me my lord. That's all right. yeah. Just call me sir. That'd be fine. I probably shouldn't say this because it's a bit rude about Bishop Mike, but somebody kind of I can't do the Bristol accent. I was there 8 years and I still can't do a Bristolian accent. Actually, neither of you have both got accents, but you're not particularly strong, are you? You're not like
I can when I need to be.
But one of them saw my dog collar and said, "Era, "Here, are you a vicar?" And then turned to Bishop Mike and said, "Here, are you a vicar?" And to which Bishop Mike said, "No, I'm a bishop." And I thought, of all the, you should have just said yes. It was much easier.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I'm a bishop. Yeah. Anyway, that's another story. Although I remember also there was this photo where Bishop Mike had, like, 3 girls wanting a selfie with him, and they're all quite pretty, and it was a bit like the new Bonds wasn't up to much, Yeah, Beauty and the Bish,
Oh, yeah.
But actually, one thing that I find interesting with street pastors, I don't know how you guys found before we're talking about your faith, but for me, actually, it sharpened me up just because you're never quite sure what conversation you got. You were being out there overtly Christian, but not in your face. People knew you're a street pastor. They knew the people who came out every Friday were Christians from local churches. So you didn't really know quite what they were going to say, but you often got faith questions. In fact, I remember you used to get a guy called Martin got someone shouting, "Oi, oi, street pastor! What about dinosaurs?" And like I say, instantly straight into a conversation about Genesis and biblical, reliability or whatever, which is actually what the question is probably about. And I don't know, I'm not sure what the question is, but for me, it certainly kept me sharp, I think. But I was thinking, in ordinary everyday life, sometimes you can go quite a while without actually having any conversation about faith. Really, how did you guys find that? Did street pastors help you become a better evangelist type person, and did transferred into both you have like proper jobs rather than me who was a vicar? Did you find it made a difference elsewhere?
It sharpens you up because you can't prepare, or you have to be prepared. You don't prepare a message or a sermon where you deliver something. You have to be constantly on your toes and be prepared in your own heart and in your heart of God, because no night out on the street as a street pastor was ever the same, was it? It was never.
And anything could happen.
Not, prayer, hymn, preach, prayer, hymn. It was never that. It's not a church service. It's not even an evangelism event inside a church. Like you said, a seeker service, Dave. It was out there on their terms, and literally anything could happen at any point. You could be asked any question about anything. We had questions about aliens and dinosaurs and do animals go to heaven, to all the different things that people would ask. The most common one, what is, if there is a God, then why is there so much suffering in the world, was the most common question that people would bring. And interesting that whenever we were asked that question, there was always a personal application of that question. So if there's a God, why is there much suffering in the world? But then the question would then go on to the personal application was, but if there's a God, why is my uncle dying of cancer? That was actually a more personal application of that question. But I remember, and you guys remember, that sometimes you'd have a very quiet night when it comes to conversations about faith and God and the universe. And it would be literally towards the end of the night, 3 a.m. or 3:15, 3:30, when we're due to actually go back and kind of get into our cars at 4 a.m, that we'd have a really good conversation, a really deep conversation. And, people, had had a drink or, it's the end of the night and they felt they could just speak their minds, and they would really just tell you how they really thought and how they really felt about everything. And it did actually give us a great opportunity to really kind of speak quite direct into situations.
I used to find there was something in that where it was almost God like saying, how much do you really want to tell people about me? Because that bit where you got so cold sometimes, someone's got so wet sometimes, you sometimes had however much you try and juggle your diary, I nearly always end up having a busy Saturday. You just, it just never quite worked out as you want it to. And that bit where it's like, I want to go home, I want to go to bed, I'm tired, I've hit a wall. And then you get a really good conversation and you'd be like, no, I'm going to stay here and finish this conversation because it's important, it's the kingdom. But there's also part of you where it's, sometimes where it's almost that sacrifice I think God rejoices in, because actually it's, the only reason you're there at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're absolutely hanging is because you love Jesus and you believe it's true. Do you know? Yeah.
I agree with Mark. I think it's the conversations at the end of the night. And as you said, Andy, that you can go the whole night and you get to the point where it's 3 o'clock, you think, right, we're going to head back now to the church and, finish up and get back in the car, and we're walking back down the high street. And, I can't remember if you were there, but we had a sort of 20-minute conversation with a couple of girls about why there was so much cabbage or in a doner kebab, you know, which went on and on and on. Well, first of all, it was convincing her that it was cabbage and not lettuce.
Round, isn't it?
And then, but then it carried on. I think it lasted about an hour in the end. You know, it starts off with 20 minutes about cabbage and 40 minutes afterwards, you know, about God and about Jesus and life and everything in between. But it is just starting a conversation really about anything.
Yeah.
And I think what it taught me was that in many ways, the best form of evangelism is the way you live your life. And being kind, showing people kindness, often just a breaking point that starts them talking. You know, if you're kind to someone, if you help someone up and they've fallen over, or just help someone cross the road, you know, anything it can be, chat to somebody about their kebab. They then start a conversation and it rolls on because they want to talk about it. They just don't know who to talk about it to. You've got to break down that barrier. So yeah, there were some really bizarre conversations that ended up like brilliant conversations.
Was Jesus an alien? ... discuss or whatever.
All sorts. Yeah.
We mentioned about Shirley, our 70-something-year-old volunteer. I remember, sadly, she died, and I remember at her funeral. I think Mark was there as well. And one of the stories was that her grandson rang her son saying, "There's a fight in Kingswood," and the dad said, "Well, you know what I've said, son. Just walk past." And he says, "I can't. Nan's in the middle of it."
Yeah, that's right.
Needless to say, that's not how Shirley died. Okay, that's yeah. She was brilliant. I remember the first day we were due to go out, she said to me afterwards, "I'm really sorry, I'm not able to go out with the street pastors this evening." And I said, "Oh no, that's a shame, Shirley. Why is that?" "I've got a parachute jump in the morning."
Yeah.
True story. I think when I'm in her 70s, I want to be like Shirley. Yeah.
I think in the 2 or 3 years I knew her, she did a parachute jump, abseiled down the Avon Gorge, slept out 2 nights like for homeless, and was actually an incredible lady really.
Yeah. And
you know, a real witness to all of us actually, that it doesn't matter who you are, there's always something you can do. And I think that's a message for everyone really. A lot of people, I can't do that. Well, I can't do street pastors. Oh, I don't like nightclubs, or I don't like being around drunk people. Well, you know, Shirley was 5 foot tall and in her late 70s, and she was probably the best at it than any of us.
Yeah, she was, yeah.
You mentioned about in your diary on a Saturday, and she never made the excuse. We're talking about, you know, us. We knew her really well and stuff, and hopefully we're communicating that on this recording. What a wonderful woman she is. But she'd come out on street pastors, and she'd go home at 3, 4 in the morning, and then she'd get up at like 8, 9 o'clock and go and help at a place called Hop, Skip and Jump for, I think it was for disadvantaged
disabled kids. Yeah.
Mm.
In Kingswood as well.
Yeah.
She was incredibly. She just give of her time and her love, and she was an inspiration. Like you said, best things come in small packages. She was about 5 foot tall, wasn't she? But
yeah,
my word, she was amazing to serve with.
Yeah. No, she's great. So both of you now have moved from street pastors and now sort of involved in leading churches. How do you find that, sort of trying to encourage other people in mission? How have you found that sort of transition from going from a church member to a church leader? How's that been for both of you?
I'll go first. So I was in a sort of an extended leadership role before. We moved into the new church and carried on with street pastors, and but I kind of knew that God was sort of telling me to just review everything I was involved with across the board, really, and which I did. I took everything to him, laid it all down, and street pastors was bizarrely the thing that he told me to lay down, and I didn't really understand it at the time, so I really enjoyed it. There were plenty of other things that I didn't enjoy as much, so I'd quite happily have laid down, but it was street pastors that I was told to do. So I remember giving my notice to you guys and saying, look, I'm going to step down now and step away. Let someone else take on my team. And I think I did my last one on the sort of a Friday in sort of July time. And then on the Sunday, I was in a leadership meeting at church, and the senior leader stepped down. And I found myself, going from number 3 to number 2, if you like. and having to take on loads more responsibility. So God knew what the timing was, knew what I needed to do, and knew that if I was exhausted on a Saturday, Sunday, that I couldn't really do the role I needed to play on a Sunday morning. How has it changed me since? That's an interesting one. I mean, I'd like to say it hasn't. I mean, drunk people come out of a nightclub is like herding sheep. In many ways. It's not too different on a Sunday morning, is it? Sometimes, if we're honest,
it can be. Yeah.
Different set of sheep, but yeah, and everyone's got their own opinion about how things should happen, and it's no different. It just it's people management in many ways. But I miss it. I do miss it still, but church leadership is slightly more tricky. You're dealing with Christians a lot more than you are non-Christians, but you still have to be on your toes, and still, you need to take them forward on their journey. You're just a bit further along the journey than you are with people who don't know Jesus at all.
Yeah,
as we all are. We're all on the same journey, just different stages of it.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was almost the street pastors bit enabled me to kept me sane enough to enough to do the more drier bits. But yeah, actually need a bit of excitement in your faith and ministry that actually enabled me to do what was quite a dry church at times, so quite hard. So it's How about you, Mark? How did you find now moving into church leadership? How have you found that transition? I know you're still very much, well, both of you are still doing that alongside a full-time job as well. You're leading churches, and is it bivocational? Is that the posh word?
Mad, I think it's the real word.
yeah. I can spell mad. I can't spell bivocational.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, for me, a transitional thing. I mean, obviously I'm still involved with my finance job, but my journey has been very much like the senior pastor, who I've just kind of stepped into the shoes of back in October. I might write a book myself, Andy, called Taking on Church Leadership During a Pandemic, which is very interesting to be handed the reins when you're in the middle of a global pandemic that the world's not seen for 100 years. So yeah, that was quite trying to lead a church and pastor people and be there for people to remotely via Zoom and text and WhatsApp and Messenger and all that, and meeting them one-to-one when we could, all these different things. So yeah, it's been a baptism of fire almost in that sense, because the church is probably 120 strong. So and within that there are different schools of thought, and Dave mentioned it then, we should do it this way, we want to do it this way, well I think this and I think that, and we should do this, and all different sheep within one sheep pen, and some of them jostling for position, whatever, and there's others that need a bit of an arm around their shoulder, and Dave's just summed it out. A lot of it is about people management and knowing what makes a certain person tick, what they need, and just the shepherd knows his sheep, well, that one there and that one there and that's so-and-so and that one's, and it's getting to know them. But that's been challenging from that perspective, because of lockdowns. There's something is that we were made for community, weren't we? We were made to be together. Person. Zoom has been a wonderful sticky plaster, but it's not the real thing. I mean, communion by Zoom or a prayer meeting by Zoom is okay, but it's not what we were made for, isn't it? We were made to be together, whether that be in a garden, a church building, or wherever. Church is the people, isn't it? So for me, I mean, even now I'm still doing the other job, but I'm fading that job out, and church has become more of the focus, if you like, and the balance is, till one day I will completely do away with my finance job. Hallelujah. After 25 years of doing it, I'm coming to the end of it.
You are the least boring accountant I know.
Thanks. I'm bored.
High praise.
Yeah.
25 years.
My favourite joke, sorry about this, Mark, is a guy walks into a pub with a crocodile and says, "Do you serve accountants?" So I said, "Yeah, of course we do." So it's okay, can I have a pint and an accountant for the crocodile? Sorry, I thought it was funny.
That's a father-in-law joke, Andy. That's terrible.
Yeah, that is. I'm yeah. Like I say, if this wasn't going out live, I would edit it or get it edited. I can't remember what I was going to say now, but there's something quite interesting as well about the pastoring thing. Actually, about you were saying, Marcus, particularly that somebody actually said in you, I can see a gift of evangelism in you. That you know, actually, you need to do more than just fill this gap that we've got on our rota, and actually, what you need to do is to be released to go out to do something outside our church. And I guess that you're now in that position to be doing that for other people, you know, to say, actually, I can see a gift in you to do something that isn't plugging the gap. Because if you're running a church, you always need people to fill all the gaps. And to actually say, no, actually, I think God's calling you over here is quite an interesting challenge.
Yeah, and I think one of the advantages that me and Anna have had, we've been at the church for 5 years. So it's not like we've come into a new church as new leaders. We know the church family already for 5 years.
Yeah.
And Nikki, you've known the New Life Church guys for many years. So actually stepping into that leadership role that you've been in for years now, knowing the people already. And we always say you should always minister out of relationships, shouldn't you? You know, you get people in to speak. And that's why, Andy, you come and preach at our place, because there's a relationship there. It's not who's this guy. And I think that's important. And that has helped.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's been a lockdown. The fact that we already have a relationship with these people, it kind of helps. It massively helps, because you already know how they tick, and you know how to kind of encourage them and spur them on.
And how have you both found evangelism in lockdown? Because we're talking about pastoring the people you've already got, but how about that sort of encountering and building relationship and building bridges and reaching out to those who currently aren't in your churches? How have you both found doing that in the midst of a lockdown?
Dave,
It's
been volunteer, Dave.
It's been interesting, if I'm honest, because you just have to do things differently. In some ways, I think it's been really good, and I think actually, you know, we talk about, certainly in our workplace environment, I'm sure Mark's to say, you have transformation directors and things, and you know, these people that get brought in, and you know, to transform your business and the way it works. And they come up with some amazing ideas, and you know, out of the 100 ideas, you might do one, might half do a second one. COVID's come in and kind of like, you know, done more for transformation, and certainly digital transformation, than any transformation director ever has done in 100 years. You know, and the church has gone from being a dinosaur meeting on a Sunday morning to an online presence solely, and I think it now needs to transition forwards into something that is both online and in person. And that doesn't mean to say you just stream your Sunday services, because they're very different.
Yeah.
And I thought for a while that actually, whilst before historically, you know, we had home groups for the church members during the week, and Sunday mornings you invite visitors to. I have to think that's kind of flipped on itself. And I was kind of thinking that for a little while before lockdown, where Sunday mornings had become more about the church gathering together to grow, because it was only the church, as I said, that were prepared to get up on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And actually, midweeks are where you do evangelism. Midweeks, you invite people to your home for a meal. You know, you maybe go out together and go bowling, and you just, you know, evangelism's not standing on a soapbox anymore, I don't think. And you know, evangelism for me is going to the bowling alley, and then with all your mates from church, having a laugh, and whilst you're having a laugh, turning to the people on the alley next to you and having a chat. You know, say, "Oh, how do you guys all know each other?" "Oh, we all go to church." Really?
Yeah.
You know, you don't look like people who go to church.
Yeah.
You know, you don't look like songs of praise. You know, that's not
look like Kate Botley.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean? You're not that kind of. I thought Thor. You don't look like Thor Hurd. But that's people's perception, and so I think evangelism for me is about being real, having fun. You know, if you're not having fun when you're doing evangelism, what makes you think anyone's going to be attracted to it?
Yeah.
You know, so you know, we all go out with some of my closest friends. you know, if you looked at us and lined us up, you would say those people, they are not friends. You know, two of my best friends in church are one's late 50s, one's early 60s. I'm still in my 40s, just. And the reality is, though, when we go out, we have a proper laugh together.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can go shopping, you know, for a church lunch, you know, when we're at New Wine, and I can turn around to my mate Pete and say, "Oh, do you reckon you can get in there?" In like in the Tesco's, and he'll go, "I'll give it a go." And next thing you know, he's climbing head first into the ball pit on a shelf, you know, through the little like bungee cords that the kids' balls in, and he's getting inside of it, and then just like popping his head out when people come past and saying hello. He's just a complete nutcase, but it's just having, you know, we have fun together.
Yeah.
But equally, when we do evangelism, we have fun together. It's the same thing. And so you'll get somebody who never goes to church, but can have a good conversation with you and will approach you. You know, because they'll see you having a laugh, they'll start a conversation, and then all of a sudden you start building on it. It's not 20 minutes, it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
And it's about doing life. And, you know, for us, we changed our church around. We flipped it on its head, where churches often have, like, you know, really good strap lines and things. And for us, there was about three things really. And we flipped the first two to a lot of churches. So for a lot of churches, it's believe, belong, become. So you believe, you belong part of a church, and you become what you need to be. Well, we flipped the first two.
That's right.
So we put belong first.
Mm.
I'd rather somebody come to our church, feel like they belong. You know, if it's a Muslim or a Sikh or somebody who have no faith at all, if they feel that they belong in our building on a Sunday morning, they can come.
Yeah.
And we'll be filled, made to feel welcome in the exact same way as anyone else. Then once you've built that relationship, then we can worry about whether they believe. But trying to just bash somebody you have no relationship with at all and get them to believe is impossible in today's society, because they just walk away. You know, then there's so many other things they can do on a Sunday morning now. You know, when I was growing up, the shops weren't open. You know, there was virtually no telly on a Sunday morning. So what do you do? Well, you went to church, because that was all there was to do.
Yeah.
Now it's the furthest thing from people's minds. So you just have to build those relationships, and then just show them actually what it is to be a Christian. By the way you live your life. Okay, yes, you can still have fun as a Christian. You know, it's okay to go to the pub, you know, and have a pint. You know, it's okay to go to football and, you know, and cheer a team on. For me, one of the things I did on a Sunday morning was, when my son got to 15, he wanted to play rugby. You know, he was playing at school, but he wanted to play club rugby. And historically, if your kid wanted to do something on a Sunday morning, you know, as a Christian, that was a major issue. So what we said was, well, okay, you can play every other week. And so every other week, I accept that you won't be in church, but you'll be at rugby. And for me, that was part of a parenting decision as much as it was anything else. But, you know, I used to go along. We used to go away on rugby tours at Easter. You know, I was never in church for 3 years. I didn't go to church over Easter. I was away on a rugby tour in Cornwall. You know, but on Easter Sunday, I got up on the coach with a microphone. I had 52, like, other blokes there, and you know, 17, 18-year-olds and all their dads. And I was able to, like, say, look, you know, it's Easter Sunday. Here's an Easter egg from us and from everybody at our church. And they were just blown away. You know, we sponsored their kit. And so, you know, there's like New Life Church blazoned over the Evening Post. They were a successful team. But, you know, it shocked people. It's like, well, hang on, a church sponsoring a rugby club, how does that work? Surely you need money for your roof. You know, and it's like, no, actually, we want to give money into the community. We want to invest in the community, not ask the community for money. And that's the bit where it shocks people. But I had some phenomenal conversations. And the discussion over whether we should sponsor their kit, I stayed out of. But the chair of trustees said, what we're doing is we're investing in your ministry. You know, that rugby club is your ministry for this period of time. So, you know, you have to look at everything and step back and say, what church was isn't what church is. Church is now, I think, it's a very different beast. If I can use the word beast to describe church, it's very different. It's a very different lamb, and
mixing the biblical metaphors a little bit, but
but it is, you know. But Mark be the same on the council estate. You know, you can't. you can't be somebody who looks down and says, "Come to us." You've got to be someone who goes there and demonstrates.
Definitely. And the other thing I'd like to say with that just is that you know, it's good they recognised the rugby club as your ministry, because so often we think of a ministry has to be an official thing that's recognised and sponsored by the church, and actually no, this was just you being a dad, but your ministry was being a Christian amongst the people you were, and loving them and being there.
Totally.
And actually it was seen as ministry rather than seen as, you know, often they'll be like, oh well, Dave's not very committed. I mean, it's actually a completely different mindset, saying actually, isn't it great that we've got a Christian in the midst of that community that's blessing and loving them?
I know. I remember going to a seminar at New Wine with Gavin Calver, who was, I think, then with Christians in Sport, now Evangelical Alliance. And I think he said, you know, if someone's gifted to play the guitar in a church, you know, they rock up to church with their guitar and their ironic hairstyle, and they're like worshipped almost as much as Jesus. But if God gifts somebody to play rugby or play professional sport, they're looked down on because they're not in church on Sunday morning. So we were judging what gifts God gives, and he said that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He said, you know, somebody in church might get to you know, speak to, you know, 100 people, or you know, in a big church, you know, 500 people. Said, you know, you've got a professional football player, they're speaking to 40,000 people.
Yeah.
Every time they speak. He said, we've got to like reimagine what it is and reevaluate giftings and things.
Definitely. Mark, what would you say? Thank you. What would you say is your response to that? I can't remember the original question actually, but can you?
Actually, I've written down a couple of things. It's interesting that Dave's just said something that I was going to say myself: belong, believe, and then behave. And I actually used different language last Sunday about people belonging to the church family, the River family. Do you feel you belong to the family? And in fact, we had, Dave, you'll remember, we used to have family time. We introduced that to the last night, family time. We called it River Family Time. People could come, and it was more informal. It was more about, you can ask questions. It wasn't that just from the front, us talking, and people really enjoyed that. But we said that the idea is that you come and you belong, you feel like you belong, part of the River family, with the anticipation you become part of the family of God. And obviously the distinction is there, but it's the same principle: belong, believe, then behave. You know, we can expect, and like David said, you know, particularly in Hartcliffe, you guys know Hartcliffe, you know, I mean, the backdrop, you know, these people have no understanding of church, the Bible, God, nothing. And the only thing they know, and a reference point that they have, is films or telly. And I watched a program the other night, and I sat there with Anna, and they showed a scene of a church. And I looked at Anna and I said, if I didn't go to church, and that was the only thing I could use as a reference point for church, I wouldn't go. Because it just looked dull and boring. It looked lifeless. It looked, the TV program presented it as irrelevant almost, that it was not relevant for this time. But that's the TVs, and that is sometimes people's perception in their minds of what Christians in church is like. If that's their only reference point, then going back to street pastors and what Dave's just talked about going to the bowling alley, going to the rugby club, actually showing these people we don't have two heads. You know, that we do live normal lives, that we do enjoy that. You like football? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I support Manchester. What? You know, they almost seem surprised by it. But TV, and they've got no reference point, and people don't go to Sunday school now, so it's not like they've got any knowledge at all. So that's why Street Pastors is such a blessing of an initiative, because it's going meeting people where they're at. And going back to just repeating some of the stuff that Dave said, I was going to say the same thing. COVID forced us online. And now we as a church are meeting together because we own our own building, so we're able to do that with COVID, obviously, restrictions and stuff. But we've not ceased to be a presence online. We've continued both now. And actually, and I've spoken to many church leaders that before COVID and now they're reaching 3 or 4 more times, if not more. I mean, globally, we're reaching people globally. A church in Hartcliffe, we've got people who are viewing in the Philippines, in Texas, Kentucky. You can do the analytics on YouTube. So the reach of the church has expanded massively under a pandemic. because churches have been forced to. And I think to drop that online presence because we're back in person, I don't think, I agree with Dave, I think we should keep both of them. And yeah, just I know a church in Birmingham, I won't mention it just in case they're watching, but they've completely changed how they do church. So they do they do the church meeting on a Saturday night, and on Sunday morning they do kind of home groups where they do church in people's homes for an opportunity to invite their neighbours and their friends. So they do the evangelism on a Sunday morning in their homes. And for those, some of the people have left the church because of it, because they just can't get their head around it. But the senior pastor and his wife, during COVID, the Lord just said, you need to do a load of unlearning. You need to unlearn a load of stuff.
Yeah.
Change how you do it. Because the current thing, and you guys, and I'm not on commission, but The Chosen, you may have seen it. I'm not on commission. There's no, but when Jesus looks to Peter, Jesus calls Matthew the tax collector, and Peter says, yeah, but this is different. And Jesus just looked at him and said, well, get used to different. The church needs to. We need to just get used to different. It's just different now.
Yeah, I need to say, God, what are you saying? What are you doing? And actually, I think that unlearn phrase is a brilliant one, actually, because, there's been an established way of how we've done it for a long time. And actually, COVID has meant that we've had to unlearn, relearn, rethink. And actually, in one sense, there's been a new imagination, I think, in mission that's quite exciting as well. But actually, for me, the question has been, which I think you guys have brought up brilliantly, is the one I came to land at. It was actually, what does it mean for ordinary people who know and love Jesus in their everyday life to live a life where they're authentically them, what I think the question I talked about, what does it mean to be an indigenous Kingswoodian that loves Jesus, and or an indigenous person from Hartcliffe who loves Jesus, or an indigenous person from French who loves Jesus, or a person in Poole or Eastbourne or wherever who loves Jesus, being a local, because I think there's something about that local person as well that I think is quite exciting. I probably need to wrap up because we normally try and keep it to the hour. But one of the things I used to like was that you guys used to get some great conversations by the fact that you used to know, I went to Speedwell School too, or I went to such and such, or I know you were at footy with me, that idea of actually being local was something that really gave you a blessing. And actually, that idea of equipping and enabling local evangelists, local people to go out and be sort of like in their community is something I find really exciting.
But also, just to finish, this is my last point, but being in an area where everybody knows you, because Kingswood's very territorial, so they knew what you were like at school, and then to see you now, they can see the difference.
Yeah.
You were this, and I remember talking outside of Chasers to the first girl I ever snogged. When I was 11, a girl called Jessica. Now she's in. And what are you doing this? I mean, I remember you from school, and that, So it's so close to home. They grow up with you. So the authenticity comes through. It's like, I know you. I know what you were like, and now I see you now.
Yeah.
That in itself is you don't need to edit that bit.
What you used to get when we used to go out on street pass, there was lots of girls saying that Mark looked like Jason Statham, which always used to make me laugh.
But I remember when one of the, I think it was one of the girls or the bloke said they thought you because you were dressed as a vicar. They said, "Are you the stripper?" Remember that?
Yeah, I was going to tell. But the only stripper they'd be shouting, "Put 'em on, put 'em on." anyway, on that note, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for been a really good chat. Actually, some really exciting stuff's come out. So so hopefully you've enjoyed watching this. It's been great. I've been really enjoyed just catching up with you both as well. So bless you, and and then we'll be doing another webinar next month in June, and we'll also be doing something slightly different in June as well. We're going to be having a challenge each week that people can maybe chat about on the weekly Zoom as well. Thank you.